Hello, puppies and kittens. Welcome to another episode of Blasphemers Bible. Mark, welcome back.
Hey.
And yep, our newest guest. I did. Lawrence had lined me up somebody else, and I forgot that he was on a separate list, and so I sent the link late. So I apologize for that.
Yeah, hopefully he either shows up today or maybe I don't know next time or something. He's
on the list. He will be automatically mailed next time.
All right. I know he works third shift, so I think the only day he would possibly be able to do the show is on Saturday morning, because he's usually out preaching on Tuesday night. So, but hopefully he shows up one of these days.
Okay.
Hey,
Could be a bucket of chuckles. Anyway,
this guy's far better than Pete Down, I promise.
Okay.
He's still a straight.
The thing is, like, he doesn't like do the whole like in your face kind of preaching. He just like sits there with like a bin of pens, and it has little Jesus messages attached to them, and he hands out free pens with like, "Here's how Jesus loves you" message.
Okay, so I don't need to go sing opera to get him to shut the fuck up.
No, he doesn't.
I have done that.
He actually really doesn't like preachers like that. There was this guy, Brother Jed, who would come onto campus once in a while. He was like, he would go from state to state. Brother Jed was insane, but he really didn't like Jed because he knew that Jed was just doing it as a performance thing. So.
Look at the dinosaur.
I have to say, Lawrence, better than P-Town is not a very high bar.
You're right. It's not a high bar at all.
Might he be capable of listening to and actually responding to the content of a question? Because that would be a...
Oh no, he definitely is. Like a lot of the time, he does like revert to the you just need, or it's like, oh well, for this it just kind of goes back to my faith thing. Like he doesn't tell you need to have faith. He instead is like he kind of reverts back to his own faith, and I'm like, okay, fine, like what you're gonna do. So, but for the most part, he does consider what other people say, so which is good.
Well, that'll be new.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're doing Deuteronomy 9.
Mm-hmm.
Do we need any preface for this?
Basically, a repetition of the golden calf narrative.
All right, because we didn't cover that enough the last time. Right.
So there are some interesting differences, though.
Oh, yeah.
And some weird, like, geographical anomalies.
Well, this is supposed to be the retelling of all the things that totes happened when you were very small and your parents were very impressed. Too bad God killed them in the desert. Listen to me or the same will happen to you. Narrative.
Yeah, it's fun when these are supposed to be retellings. When I have argued this in the past, and it was mostly based off of Van Setter's work, that this was one of the original ones. Like, you have this tradition mixing with the one in Kings about Jeroboam's golden calves, and you mix them all up, and you get the golden calf story in Exodus. So that was always kind of my view of it.
I think that has merit. We forget that at least the priestly portions, be they H or P, pre or post exilic, of the Genesis, Exodus narratives and Leviticus and everything, were written after the Deuteronomist narratives. The Deuteronomist narratives at that time, Judah was still a country. Israel, maybe, I don't know. There was a lot of war, but there was actually still technically a kingdom there. So while the stories may have been older and definitely referencing older things, shitting on the concept of the golden calf was obviously a big deal for Josiah, as we dealt with last time with the centralizing worship, and they're just doing it to get away from coming to the temple, so God's pissed at them. Blah, 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 blah. Come give me your money. As always, it's religion. But then, so it's very interesting that this supposed retelling, which even before we gave up on the idea of a historical Moses was recognized to have been later, was actually earlier than, not all, but many of the writings incorporated into the earlier parts of the Pentateuch.
It's sad that I have a nice tricorn pirate hat right over there, but I can't put it on because it terrifies him, and he will rip a hole in my ear.
Oh, that's so
Oh,
sad.
just put on a bandana. That's plenty piratey.
Yeah. Okay, continuing. Who's reading today? Oh, volunteers. I'm guessing I'm reading today.
Yeah,
I'm
sure.
sorry, I'm too Canadian and polite to put myself forward.
There's not a whole
I'll
lot
put
of
Lilith
Hebrew.
forward. Lilith, you want to read?
Sure, I can take a turn.
Okay, read up to 20.
Yes, Tomer. Deuteronomy 9. Hear, O Israel, you are now about to cross the Jordan to go in and dispossess nations greater and stronger than you, with large cities that have walls up to the sky. The people are strong and tall. Anakites, you know about them and have heard it said, who can stand against the Anakites? But be assured today that the Lord your God is the one who goes across ahead of you like a devouring fire. He will destroy them. He will subdue them before you, and you will drive them out and annihilate them quickly, as the Lord has promised you.
But
And
you
after
still got to do all the killing.
Well, this is kind of his Henry V speech. It's not nearly as good as Shakespeare, but
And a bunch of you are still going to die.
That's at this point.
Yeah.
It just seems to
You
be an
bled with
occupational
Wallace.
hazard.
Now bleed with me.
Pretty much. Yes. After the Lord your God has driven them out before you, do not say to yourself, the Lord has brought me here to take possession of the land because of my righteousness. No, it is on account of the wickedness of these nations that the Lord is going to drive them out before you. It is not because of your righteousness or your integrity that you are going to take possession of their land. But on account of the wickedness of these nations, the Lord your God will drive them out before you to accomplish what he swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Understand then that it is not because of your righteousness that the Lord your God is giving you this good land to possess, for you are a stiff-necked people.
Stiff-necked.
Yes. Oh. That's later. That's in God's private diaries. Remember this, and never forget how you provoked the Lord your God to anger in the desert. From the day you left Egypt until you arrived here, you have been rebellious against the Lord. At Horeb, you aroused the Lord's wrath so that he was angry enough to destroy you. When I went up the mountain to receive the tablets of stone, the tablets of the covenant that the Lord had made with you, I stayed on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. I ate no bread and drank no water and did not go to the bathroom. The Lord gave me 2 stone tablets inscribed by the finger of God. On them were all the commandments. Yeah. Does he have one?
His
On
usually
him.
appendage.
God is Cthulhu, confirmed. On them were all the commandments the Lord proclaimed to you on the mountain out of the fire. On the day of the assembly, at the end of the 40 days and 40 nights, the Lord gave me 2 stone tablets, the tablets of the covenant. And the Lord told me, go down from here at once, because your people whom you brought out of Egypt have become corrupt. They have turned away quickly from what I commanded them and have made a cast idol for themselves.
Have
And
you
the
noticed
Lord-
that happens with everybody that God directly talks to? I mean, people who meet him face to face somehow turn away from him and worship false idols, like within days. They forget the whole conversation.
It's almost like it wasn't nearly as impressive as the story wants to make it sound.
Mhm.
No,
I
it's
mean,
okay.
it certainly sounds like one of those very anthropomorphic god deity, you know?
Oh
A
yeah.
guy, he lives in a mountaintop, sounds like a volcano, and he
Mhm.
speaks from the eruption.
Yeah, well, and everyone totally heard a voice, but only Moses could understand it properly and go close enough to hear. And isn't that convenient?
And his finger melts letters into stone.
Yeah, there you go.
Minute
But it
Rug.
takes
Um,
40 days to do that.
I was I was actually taught kind of when in Jewish school, like there was it doesn't really make sense how these ancient peoples were like, or the Israelites themselves, they saw God, whatever, but they turned to idol worship. Like, why did they like idol worship so much? And we were kind of like taught that, like, oh yeah, like the like ancient people kind of were addicted to idol worship almost, or at least there was a pleasure in it that we don't have anymore. And it's like God was like kind to us and took away this uh idol worship need that everyone had, or
It
something like
sounds a
that.
lot like the man who calls his wife a whore for talking to another man at a party.
Yeah, how
That's
could
true. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
The-
definitely an
the-
ad hoc explanation for what's going on. Like, how come these people turn to idol worship so quickly and so easily? Like from our modern perspective, like idol worship just seems silly.
Yeah.
Like
have,
how could these holy people have turned to that?
have you guys come across people that are into Santeria, like the Caribbean voodoo Santeria?
Oh, not
No.
personally, no. I've
Yep.
heard of it,
Yeah.
but
So
only
living in Miami, I came across a few people that had little shrines in their at home with their different gods, and there's something really interesting that they put out food and they put out little alcohol drinks and whatnot, and I think part of that mystery is like the feeling that you're playing your part and you're doing what you're supposed to do on a daily basis so that you get rewarded and blessings come, or you find favor in the eyes of the gods. In their case, they're using saints and idols that have some they serve different functions in their lives, and for some reason that works for them. They feel like they're being they're doing something, they're being benefited by something.
it can
Oh,
feel good to make yourself part of the greater tradition of a people and humanity and through time, even something as simple as communion. I remember times in faith where it'd be like, I'm taking part in this simple ritual that all these Christians through all of time, it sort of connects you to this greater network. And that can be a very good thing for the soul. Unfortunately, you know, the thing I was connecting myself to was really incredibly fucked up. So
I mean, I think obviously, like, if you grew up in a culture of monotheism, you would see polytheism and idol worship as like weird and strange. Like, how could you even think this is normal? But if you were brought up in a polytheistic society, like, you wouldn't think it was strange or weird in any way. So I think it's more people don't want to admit that um, bringing up people, indoctrinating them into a specific religious mindset is possible. And like that, the religious people don't want to admit that, oh, the only reason why we think it's weird is because we, teach our kids
yeah,
not to
yeah, because we're
to
used
see
to
it
it
as weird.
basically.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And that, I guess, like principle, like they don't want to admit, so
Reading,
they'll come up with
yeah.
some
Reading
weird reason.
Descartes or philosophers from a little while, like far enough in the past that thought processes were a bit different. It's interesting how much ground they place on the form of thinking that they feel is natural, without ever occurring to them that maybe they're just used to it because that's the culture.
Yeah.
Sorry, you saying, Mark?
Well, I mean, just simply to add, like, if you ever travel in throughout South America, you notice how, like, if you get on a taxi cab, they'll have the saint that's their patron saint of the taxi cab drivers. So it's like different, like, subcultures within like this very religious, very open minded to idols and saints and whatnot. sort of like it's ingrained in part of the culture where that's not very common in places like in America. You know, you won't ever see that on an Uber car.
Okay, so
Necessarily.
I'm a little older, so I'm going to assume that the patron saint of taxi drivers is Latka.
Hmm.
And no one's going to get that joke unless there's.
I know.
I got that one.
Latka, the potato pancake.
Andy Kaufman.
We're heading
Yep.
towards the holidays, which is the saint of sailors, prostitutes, and children. Nice combination. Saint
What
Nicholas.
the actual fuck?
Which saint is that?
Saint Nicholas, aka
What?
Santa.
Oh, really?
He punched Arius in the face.
Santa Claus.
Yes, that is the story. Yeah, that he punched
Yeah.
Arius in the face.
I think we should.
Merry Christmas. Have a knuckle sandwich.
I think we should continue.
Hey.
Okay, well,
Die
hold on.
Hard is-
Wait.
Minute Rice offers $5.69 and says, "The word of God sucks ass today." Aaron, could you impart us with the words of Godzilla instead? I feel that would be a much less abusery. Okay.
Yeah, we'll probably get that at some point during the stream.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Sure.
we only have the abusery version.
Yep, yeah, one more, Arn.
And then Trevor Wright says this God seems to always have an obsession with Egypt. Laugh. Yep.
Well, you see, he beat up this one kid in high school and he thinks that makes him tough, so he never stopped bragging about it.
I got 4 touchdowns in one game. Okay, I get you.
And for the next 60 years, you'll talk about nothing else. Even when you can't stand up. Sorry, what verse was I at?
14?
13.
13, yes. Ah, yes, the people have become corrupt. Tisk, tisk. And the Lord said to me, I have seen these people, and they are a stiff-necked people indeed. Let me alone so that I may destroy them and blot out their name from under heaven. And I will make you into a nation stronger and more numerous than they. So I turned and went down from the mountain while it was ablaze with fire. And the 2 tablets of the covenant were in my
Wait.
hand.
The mountain was ablaze in fire?
Yes.
How do we have mountains ablaze in fire?
Magic. And if you think of any natural explanation, you're a dirty, dirty heathen.
Okay.
Could it be lava flow from a volcano?
Nope, we're not allowed to say that. No matter how many times the Bible talks about volcanoes, we can't admit the Bible talks about volcanoes.
My God, it talks
So,
about
like,
him
are you
treading
going
on
to
the
annoy
backs of the
Lawrence now?
sea, Aaron. Like, is he a sea god? Like, my guy.
Well, he's a composite mutant god, so they tack on things from everywhere.
Right,
Really,
yeah.
he should look like some sort of a deformed
Yeah,
mutant.
Yahweh was
like,
originally a Warren Storm god.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you could say it's just the same imagery as like the what's it called again? The bush. What's it? What do they
Right.
call
Fiery
it?
bush.
Oh.
The fiery. Wait, what's it
burning bush.
called?
The burning bush.
bush.
Burning
That's it.
bush.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is
Well,
also
that-
referred to as there's a gaseous outcropping that there's a phenomenon where you have this fire that just burns like a bush out of the ground. And I was reading an article that was talking about this kind of phenomenon when it happens in obviously volcanically active places. This is part of a volcanic eruption.
Mm.
But when this happens, this is described as a burning bush. I'm like, okay, well, that seems a bit of a stretch, but
Yeah, it sounds.
I
like
mean,
late
I did
night.
read such an article.
things look like other things, but today we have penicillin, so take care of your burning bush soon. All right.
Go ahead.
So I'm going to genocide them all and turn Moses into a great nation because I'm just such a good God. I'm so competent. And so I turned and went down from the mountain. Well, it was ablaze with fire, and the 2 tablets of the covenant were in my hands. And when I looked, I saw that you had sinned against the Lord your God. You had made for yourselves an idol, cast in the shape of a calf. You had turned aside quickly from the way that the Lord had commanded you, so I took the 2 tablets and threw them out of my hands, breaking them to pieces before your eyes. Then once again I fell prostrate before the Lord for 40 days and 40 nights. I ate no bread and drank no water. Again, because of all the sin you had committed during doing what was evil in the Lord's sight.
Because it's possible to not drink water for 40 days.
80 unless he had a drink and a sandwich while he was throwing a temper tantrum with the tablets.
Is it press X to doubt?
Yeah. Which is
Yeah.
that second fast is not in Exodus, by the way.
No, not at all. I personally think Moses is being a drama queen, but seems in character.
Or whoever made up the story.
God is a bitchy drama queen. I am very firm in this opinion. And all his creators too. So I threw the drank no water, doing evil in Lord's sight, and so provoking him to anger. I feared the anger and wrath of the Lord, for he was angry enough with you to destroy you. But again, the Lord listened to me. And the Lord was angry enough with Aaron to destroy him. But at that time, I prayed for
It's like
Aaron
what I
too.
do.
Oh, he made the statue and then went, happened?
No, I know that's what Aaron did.
Ew.
But never mind.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. You got us all trained into saying your name right.
I love the way that Aaron explains that in Exodus. Like, oh, I just gathered up all this gold, and out, poof, came this golden calf. Like,
I don't know what happened. It's like the child who's been painting on the wall all morning, and they have like an entire panel. They're like, I don't know. I just opened the box of paints, and I don't know what happened.
Well, you were gone for like more than a week, man.
Okay, I think I'll start my commentary.
Let me just get to the end of 21.
Fine.
Also, I took that sinful thing of yours, the calf you had made, and I burned it in the fire because that totally works with gold. Then I crushed it and ground it to powder as fine as dust and threw the dust into a stream that flowed down from the mountain.
Yeah, there are a good amount of things here. So as Mark already noted, there are some things that are different in the Exodus version and some things that are the same. So like one, it's not made of gold here, but it's usually like in headings it's like the golden calf because that is the story it's associated with, but it's not gold in this narrative. There are clear connections to the rest of the Deuteronomistic history, especially to the one, especially to the story in Kings about Jeroboam and his golden calves. Like for example, the way that they are destroyed actually mimics the way the idols are destroyed at the end of Second Kings. So it's clear that the verbiage is also the words, the same words are also used in Exodus, which is why to me it kind of seems like these are a mixture of those accounts. One of the things that I did want to note is the fact that God wrote the tablets with his finger. So if I may play P-Town for a moment, so in John, it's mostly it's John 8, but it's technically like John 7:53 through 8:12 or something like that. It's called the Pericope Adulterae, and it's the story of Jesus and the woman taken in adultery. That is a later story, by the way. It's a later insertion. I have a video on that if anyone's interested in how we know that. But the interesting thing is at the very end of that story, Jesus is writing on the ground with his finger. And in the Bible, the only character that ever writes with their finger is God. So if I play P-Town, it's
same
prophecy.
thing in Daniel.
Right, yeah, with the hand on the So so in P-Town's mind, that's a prophecy, but it's not a prophecy. It's a literary technique. So if you want to tie someone into God, you can say that he wrote with his finger. So historically does have some significance, or theologically has some significance. But yeah,
definitely a literary reference, although it falls a little short as a prophecy since I've seen every small child do that. Right. So unless you're going for,
Yeah. And it was also very funny to me how in verse 5, it is not because of your righteousness or uprightness of your heart that you are willing that you are going in to occupy their land, but because of the wickedness of these nations. So like, it's not that
And he says it 3
you're
times.
good. Yeah, exactly. It's not that you're good; it's that they're bad, and that speaks
Coincidence.
very much to this exilic kind of mentality, right? Because they're trying to justify why the exile happened,
Yeah.
and then why they were allowed to return. So they kind of have this and we talked about it before, right? The kind of like abuser mentality that goes in with God here, and because the thing is, when it comes to like the Babylonians, for example, in the prophets and in the king's narratives, we will see that they are consistently presented as like Israel was wicked, which is why the Babylonians had to come in and punish them. They were God's tools. And in the same way, it seems that Israel is being used as God's tools here. So it's just very funny how they
And
cope.
it is interesting. It's a lot of copium, but there's also an interesting underlying element to it where you talk about where you're looking at if God punished the Israelites for their infidelity by driving them out, and he's going to punish the people who are there indigenously by driving them out ahead of Israel. But Israel was allowed to come back. Why would not the indigenous people be allowed to come back? And then there has to be a way why, well, we're special because we have the covenant with God because of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, and God gave us this land. This land is mine. God gave this land to me. And I just like to say, God does not give land.
Well, he
Yeah.
kind of does, right? He also takes it as well.
Well, he says when he says I give you this land, it means go kill the people who live there.
Yeah. No, I'm talking about in reality, God does not
in reality,
give land.
no.
And every argument on that basis should be thrown out immediately.
Agreed.
Speaking of killing people, notice how in this section there's no mention of the assassination of 3,000 non Yahweh followers or non Levites.
No,
that you see in Exodus.
Oh, the kill every man your neighbor and every man your friend and every man your brother, and the Levites did according to the law of, to the word of Moses, and there fell among the people 3,000 that day. I remember that one.
Yeah, Moses gets up and he goes, "Hey, kind of like stand up if you're with Yahweh."
Yeah, and
then,
that was how the Levites won the priesthood. It wasn't nepotism at all, I swear.
Yeah, and so then he commands them to go like bring daggers and kill everyone who did not stand up for Yahweh. So
is that
that's
evidence that
Levites did it.
So is that evidence that was like a later polemic against the Aaron priesthood?
Yeah, because in Jeroboam's account, he basically says, "Okay, Levites, you're free of your duties. I'm gonna install some other people." So when it said that, I think the Levites were the only ones that stood behind Moses in the golden calf narrative in Exodus, that was kind of that it was acting on that polemic, right? Like it specifically the Levites were the heroes there.
And Aaron was
right.
Was involved more.
Right. Because of what Jeroboam did, the writer of the Exodus narrative was saying, well, no, the Levites are the good guys here. So
I mean, it's possible that here in Deuteronomy 9:20, it says, "Oh, moreover, God was angry with Aaron to have destroyed him." So he was into that. Might not even be referring to the golden calf incident at all. It might just be referring to his sons.
Well, it is in the golden calf narrative because there are later portions which we're going to read next where he talks about later things that happen in the desert. His son's strange fire is, I believe, 1 or 2 genocides later. But I do have to say, I'm not certain what it says that the good guy in every story is made the good guy by stabbing civilians out of zeal for God.
Yeah, and then there was a plague too that Yahweh sent afterwards to just kind of finish them off.
Yeah.
It's also interesting here in Deuteronomy how the Aaron's role in that incident gets totally downplayed.
Oh yeah, big time.
Yeah.
Although
So,
it's interesting, yeah, it's interesting to think like what was the circumstances that incited that inclusion in the Exodus and its exclusion here,
mhm.
because there are tales of the priesthood passing around different areas of the Levitic line, like with Samuel's mentor and his sons and them all dying, and the priesthood passing to another family during the time of David. Because Saul kills all the priests. Almost. Very close.
And then I'll mention one more that gets omitted here, and that's the drinking of the water after the golden calf was pulverized. That happened in Exodus. That doesn't take place here.
It does.
It just says, he just pours it down the stream.
It doesn't say that they drank
I have
from
a
the
comment
stream
on
or
this.
anything. Yeah.
Yeah. But it does in the earlier story say they were made to drink from the stream. I think that's what started the plague, wasn't it? Or one of them. God's very smitey. Anyway.
I see one comment.
Yeah.
Aaron?
All right. So Matt White says, human survival. It's 3 weeks without food, 3 days without water, 3 minutes without air, and 3 seconds without internet connection.
Okay.
But yeah,
now,
all the times that they go 40 days without food and 40 days without drink and all of we're just supposed to believe that because we're stupid.
Or it's magical symbolic numbers that were used to emphasize the importance of the fast, and we're just so stupid in the modern day as to take it literally because we're idiots.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I'll start my commentary. First on verse 1, Lundbom notes that this sermon begins like chapter 7, citing the inhabitants of the land as nations more numerous and mightier than you. Deuteronomy makes much of border crossing, as seen in 2 verses 4 and 18, which are rites of territorial passage. Nelson writes that the formula, Hear, O Israel, in Hebrew Shema Yisrael, is a renewed call for attention and is expressed without any object indicating content, much like 6:4 and 23. It is used as a reminder that Moses is speaking on the threshold of crossing the Jordan and launches the topic of conquest. On verse 3, like a devouring fire, a more accurate reading will be Yahweh your God, he is crossing before you a devouring fire. Lundbom notes that the difference between the consuming fire here and in 424 is slight. Whereas in 424, Israel is warned about what judgment will be like if it violates the covenant, here the metaphor describes Yahweh's judgment on the inhabitants of Canaan. On the word quickly here, in Hebrew maher, Codex Vaticanus of the Septuagint omits this word. McCarthy writes that its absence in verse 16 and in 426 suggests that this word was a later addition in the Masoretic text, although Lundbom writes that this word should be retained. On verse 5, Tigay comments, as far as the Canaanites' defeat is concerned, the Israelites would be correct to attribute it to the Canaanites' wickedness. God's justice is a cardinal tenet in the Bible, and the point is made several times that God did not deprive the Canaanites of their land arbitrarily, but because of their morally outrageous practices, as seen in Leviticus 18:3, 20:40-30, 20:23, and Deuteronomy 12:13 and 18:12. In Genesis 15:16, Abraham was told that since the Amorites' guilt was not yet complete, his descendants would have to wait several generations before receiving the land. But to date, Israel has not earned the right to succeed them. God brings Israel into the promised land only to fulfill the oath he made to its ancestors, the oath that sustains it, even when it is devoid of merits. On verse 7, Nelson and Weinfeld note that verse 7 marks a shift from exhortation, verses 1 to 7a, to history, and from second person singular to plural address. On verse 9, 40 days and 40 nights, Tigay notes that during this time Moses learned the remainder of the laws, as seen in 528. He further notes that 40-day period is frequently found in the Bible, as seen in Genesis 7, 4, 17, and 52, and Jonah 3, 4, and seems to reflect the idea that 40 days constitute the proper time for the completion of a lengthy process. Augustine, in Sermon 5132, argued that since Moses, Elijah in 1 Kings 19, verses 7 to 8, and Jesus in Matthew 4, verses 1 to 11, all fasted for 40 days, and the number 40 is frequent in Scripture, it indicates the need to commemorate the Lord's body.
Ah, you gotta love it. Gotta love those those apologetics.
Yeah.
Lord's body?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Beats me.
God had a body.
Yeah.
Well,
So
he
it-
has a finger,
Augustine-
doesn't he?
Yeah, right. Yeah. So like Augustine, very well known Christian, in like what the early 5th century. The commemoration of the Lord's body, of course, would be about Jesus for him. But it's also important that even in the Old Testament, God has a body. It's not usually talked about because a lot of Christians don't like that idea, but it's very, very evident.
Yeah, and I think this quote from Tigay speaks to that. I hope I'm not jumping ahead of Tomer here, but he says that critical theory sees all of these differences as representing Deuteronomy's attempts to downplay anthropomorphic conceptions that localize God's presence in specific objects, just as it insists that the temple is not God's dwelling, but the place where his name is present. So it's like tweaking the ideology a little bit, it seems like.
Yeah, it definitely was like saying, "Oh, this is just anthropomorphic language," you know, it and excusing it away as like, you know, the Bible speaks the language of men or whatever. Like, you can see that development, I guess.
Mhm.
But it seems like I thought it had something to do with like, Christians eating the little cracker things.
Oh,
Yeah, it was bread and wine. It's a few bits from
God is a biscuit.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
God
it
is-
has the basis.
Jesus is a biscuit. Sorry,
Yeah,
Jesus is a
that
biscuit.
idea
Let him
has a
soften
basis
you up.
in it, but yeah, it's not the core.
and it's filtered through Neoplatonism, which gets into a whole other thing. But yeah,
At
there's an
least
ancient
Italian-
concept of eating your God, you become like him or her, that kind of thing.
Yeah, wasn't because with the Greek gods and the Roman gods, like Zeus or Jupiter, whatever you want to call him, he ate his first wife, and like he imbued himself with her characteristics. His father ate all his siblings, and he was the youngest, and he gave a stone. His mother gave a stone, and then Saturn vomited up them later, and they were all fine. So it was like it wasn't real eating in the way, with the digesting and the whatnot.
It goes best with fava beans and Chianti.
I think I'll continue. On verse 13, and the Lord said to me. In the Septuagint, this phrase is followed by, I have spoken to you once and twice, saying. And McCarthy writes, the source of the Septuagint's longer reading is puzzling and without parallel or versional support. It may have originated in an interpretation of Exodus 33 verses 3 to 5, where God spoke not just once, but twice, accusing the people of being stiff-necked. Although only part of the Masoretic text reading is attested by 4Q Deuteronomy G, it contains sufficient to indicate that, according to the space available, there is no room to accommodate the plus of Septuagint. On verse 17, Weinfeld comments, in Exodus 32:19, the gripping, quote-unquote, and the smashing before their eyes is missing. Deuteronomy wants to make clear that the breaking of the tablets was an intentional act and not a spontaneous one, as it might appear from the text in Exodus. Breaking a tablet in the ancient Near East tradition connoted cancellation of the validity of a document. The violation of the commandments, validated by the covenant, made the the covenantal document void, and the breaking of the tablet document was the proper sign for it.
Yeah, see, something like that. When people tell me, like people who aren't like scholars, most of the run of the mill, like, oh, Bible is fake, lol, kind of people. So sorry if you hear the cats playing in the background. So the when it comes to something like that, like that's not context that you could just get from reading it. You would need some more historical context to understand the significance of the breaking of the tablet. Like it just because that's not something that that idea doesn't exist in modern culture that way. So it's to me it speaks. I mean, does it to like physically break it?
Yeah, no, I
You would do like tearing a contract.
Yeah, I think you're
Yeah,
wrong
you
in a way, because if you're using it as the writing implement, yeah, like if you, I mean, they always try and make it like marriage or whatever, and cheating and adultery because you know said hi to another god at the dinner party. But he's trying to play it up like it was your wedding day and you went to sign the marriage contract and you went into the next room and found your wife still in her wedding dress, like getting railed by your best man, and you screamed at them both and tore up the marriage contract in front of them.
Right, yeah, but
Yeah.
like in the modern world, right? Like
That
at least
wouldn't invalidate it legally.
right, yeah,
Yeah.
it wouldn't invalidate it.
I think there's a relationship there between the breaking of the tablets and the melting of the golden calf.
Mm,
I think those two
yeah.
things are somewhat analogous because the tablets are sort of testifying against that type of worship. So if that kind of worship is going to be part of this thing might as well be void. I did want to ask you guys, how much do you know about like those? Because I wonder, like the two tablets, right? Like what are, and you're kind of saying something alluding to that, Lawrence. What do we know about tablets in antiquity or in more ancient writings, like some of the Babylonian traditions? You guys heard of like the tablets of destinies?
I've
Oh, I
heard
don't
stuff
know about that.
similar to that. Like I know that for a lot of the time, tablets, they would be set up for public viewing, in many cases, like Hammurabi and there's also some Greek tablets that had like a bunch of laws inscribed. So the that that was mostly like a public viewing thing. But then of course you'd have like that being like the only stuff that they could write on for a period of time, and something like that. uh a lot of the time like they would have been used for like to practice writing, for example. uh so I got they had a lot of usages, right?
What about like the cylinder of Cyrus?
Yeah, that one,
Like,
so you could copy it very quickly. Yeah.
So
nice.
what comes to mind is I think it's in the Enuma Elish, where you get this narrative of Marduk, the chief god, who at some point is given the tablet of destinies, and and I'm not an expert in the ancient Near East, but I've done some reading, and it looks to me like these tablets give Marduk the authority to govern all of the universe. So I think what might be happening here, if we're somewhat alluding to, or that archetype of tablets mean authority, that these tablets are not, it's not a thing between the gods, it's a thing between the God and his chosen Moses. And the tablets means he has authority of the world.
Yeah, it's
And
a
that's how
it's a
the land
contractual
is.
thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, they're literally making the very definition of a covenant. They're making a deal. Like, you do this, we do this.
Yeah.
I would just
Okay.
like to say, even according to the text, God never keeps his deals. And it honestly, even in mythological tales, Satan actually keeps the letter of his deals at the very least. So if I had to make a deal with either, I'd go with Satan. At least he sticks to his bargains.
See, that's because Satan is a prosecutor, and he knows the the ramifications of not following a contract.
And Yahweh the
Whereas
dirty cheat.
whereas God is inclined to say things like, I am altering the deal. Pray I don't alter it any further.
Yes. Oh my God. That, but every 3 seconds, like the Robot Chicken episode.
So SJL says, question for Tomer. And am I saying your name right at last?
I don't
Tomer?
care.
Okay, so no.
Fine.
All right. I assume the commenters you use are mainly believers, correct?
You could say that. I mean, it depends. I mean, the traditional commentators, obviously. But for the modern ones, yeah, mostly. I mean, I use both Jewish and Christian sources. I know that Richard Nelson is Lutheran. Lundbom, I think, also a minister. When it comes to Tigay, I think he is conservative Jew. And Weinfeld, I think, is a secular. But yeah, most of them are like religious believers. At least as I know.
Yeah, but I think it's important to note that in like the kind of culture right now is that the scholarship itself needs to be secular. Like you cannot just include God as an explanation for things. So even the believers, modern commentators, not the ancient ones, they are held, their feet are held to the fire on this one. Because if they start, basically preaching, everyone else is gonna be on their fucking ass about it. So it's in everyone's best interest to actually have secular studies of these things. And I mean, you can never fully get rid of that influence, but they don't outright, like assume the God hypothesis for the writing of these things.
Which is good, but it's kind of funny because Tomer, you use one, I believe, medieval Jewish scholar whose name escapes me because I'm just
Rashi. I mean, I use a lot of them.
No, I know, but the one who's the rationalist, who's always looking for
Ibn Ezra.
rational Ibn Ezra,
Ibn Ezra.
because he's always coming up with like, well, maybe there was a volcano that put red mud in the Nile, and maybe it was this, and maybe it was that, and like I can appreciate that he's trying to look for natural explanations for the thing in the Bible. But it still never occurs. Like the interesting thing about apologetics is that no matter how many excuses you come up with, you can never admit the most probable natural explanation, which is that people say shit that isn't literally true.
Yeah.
The hell you say?
But we're gonna bring him up like in a bit.
Okay.
Yeah, we're probably gonna bring him up again soon.
Good.
All right, I'm going to read a couple more comments. Deviant Outcast says, according to J. Smith, I'm guessing that means Joseph Smith. I have no idea. According to J. Smith, God has a huge dong. So in total, we have one pointer and one peeper. No wonder we humans, no wonder he needs humans to do the work. I guess that's what he says. And, oh, please don't think about that finger. Which finger? This one? Okay.
As a woman who has been with the men, I would just like to say that no man who is well endowed spends this much time bragging, bitching, and blaming.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's collecting foreskins and he's adding them on top, make them bigger and bigger.
Oh, yeah.
It's a layer cake.
Okay.
Not to mention
Trevor
that it
Wright.
would have been uncircumcised too. So it was big and uncircumcised and circumcised. Sorry.
Yeah, that's a big 3 inches. That's what God's wife said to him one day.
Trevor and Wright says, Lawrence, can you explain this misconception as to why some think it's necessary Jews need a direct connection to the ancient Israelites to be considered a Jewish? Is this true or false?
Well, aside from the Jewish, so I don't know enough about like the genetic history, right? But what I can say is like the idea of this being the promised land in the Bible is enormous, and also but to me, like I know that a lot of Jews do trace their lineage back to some group in Israel, in ancient Israel. and I don't know about the veracity of those claims because
I can
don't know.
say that according to what I've read, at least in genetic studies, that Jews do have like it seems that they do have origin where around the area of Canaan, at least for most of the. That's at least what I remember. I mean, for Ashkenaz, there are like variational differences. For example, for Ashkenazim, the paternal genes are more connected to the Levant, but the maternal are more connected to Europe because obviously they were
Italy.
expelled, from Italy. But
exactly.
but
I would say
that...
from from a religious perspective, like technically, yes, you don't have to be a descendant of Abraham to be Jewish. You just have to convert and go through the process.
It's a long process too.
But because of a history of like conspiracy theories and stuff like that about Jews are Khazars or converts, or Jews are the real Jews are these people and all of that sort of stuff. So it is important to just as a comeback to those to mention, to be like, oh well, actually no, modern day Jews are connected to the ancient times. It's not, they're not just what's people say, LARPing or whatever. But it's not actually, from a religious perspective, it's not actually technically needed.
It's more of a historical,
It's
genetic,
just, it is a fact.
It's not based on the Bible.
If you convert, do you like trace the lineage of the group you converted with or to? I know Jews don't have a lot of converts because they play hard to get. Thank you.
Not really. The lineage of a tribe isn't important. Only for like Levites. So you can't convert. You can't convert to being a Levite or a priest or a Cohen.
Could you marry one if you converted? Like, could you marry into that tribe if you converted?
Yeah.
What I've heard, and I'm sure like there are various
only
views
high
on
priests
this,
can't marry converts or something like that.
but there are two things. There's the Jewishness aspect, and then there's tribal lineage.
Yeah.
So you can become Jewish, and I think if you can only be Jewish if you have a Jewish mother.
Yeah.
So there's possibility of a Gentile father that converts. But you cannot do is on that, if you're going to claim tribal lineage, your dad must be of that tribe. So therefore, dad must be Jewish descent.
Yeah. So it's only really important for. Yeah, it's only really important for like being a Levite or a Cohen, and I guess if you want to claim descent from David, being of the house of Judah or something like that.
Or if you're a gay Floridian senator from New York.
And that
we don't have to talk about him anymore.
And that's my criticism of Jesus, because if Joseph was not his dad, as the Gospels claim, the Holy Spirit, whatever, then there's no way he can claim tribal lineage to David.
Unless Carrier had a point with the idea of using preserved David's sperm to make the Jesus, because why the hell not? I don't know. It's all magic anyway. Who cares what you're doing at this point?
That is probably like
that is one of his weirder claims.
That's probably the worst of Carrier's hypotheses. Honestly,
that
Jesus in space.
Even when I was a mythicist, I didn't buy that.
No, like, Jesus in space is not nearly as weird as he makes it sound. He deliberately makes it sound sci-fi when it's an archaic.
For that part, I remember how he misrepresented a good amount of like rabbinical literature. It was just very poorly done. And I was like, I even told him this in person. I was like, hey, you talk about a cosmic sperm bank. You know that makes you sound insane, right?
But I think he wanted to sound insane. Like, here's the thing. When he talked about Jesus in heaven just below the moon, that wasn't weird to me because I'm a weird nerd who reads all kinds of weird nerd stuff. I've read the Divine Comedy twice for shits and giggles. I wouldn't even write on a paper on the damn thing. The whole thing, too. Paradise and all. So the concept of a tiered heaven delineated by the planets, which is more corrupt the lower and closer to the fleshly, dirty earth you go, and the more spiritual and pure the farther you go away. That's a concept that's been around forever. Augustine was in a cult that used that concept, the Manicheans, I can't remember.
The Manichaeans.
Manichaeanism.
Manichaeans, thank you. Dull sublunary lovers love whose soul is sense cannot admit absence because it doth remove those things which elemented it. John Donne's referencing this. It's a very classic idea.
The Manichaeans. I'm pretty sure I saw that episode of Doctor Who.
Would they refuse to eat because it would corrupt their souls or something? Because
No, where they were literally mannequins.
Maybe
Huh?
you're thinking of the
No, you're
machination.
thinking of the angels.
No, that's the episode of Rose where Christopher Eccleston meets
Yeah.
Rose Tyler.
Just to quickly respond to a question in the chat, was someone asked about are Levites more inbred, and I would say like no, they're not more inbred necessarily, because it's only the tribal lineage is through the father, so the mother can be anyone. So
They
they're not
haven't gotten
more
to Arkansas
inbred
yet.
as a group. They're not an inbred group. They're just the father is from the same lineage. Yeah.
Yeah, well.
Well, I mean, Ashkenazi Jews are very inbred as a
Yes.
group because they've had like a what's it called again?
Isaacs.
What's it called when you have a
Bottleneck.
Bottleneck, yeah,
yes.
genetic bottleneck.
yeah, they had a genetic
Okay.
bottleneck a few hundred years ago, and they've got like their own genetic diseases and stuff.
It makes me wonder if there was a guy there's called Cheddar Man. There's this fossil remains from somebody from 9,000 years ago who was found in
Cheddar.
Yeah, I thought there was
Cheddar
something
Man.
like cheddar wick, or
The cheddar
you know how
cheese
you-
comes.
you
Yeah,
know how
cheddar
you
cheese.
Brits fuck up names. Yeah,
cheddar cheese comes from a place called Cheddar, and there's a gorge called the Cheddar Gorge that's next to the town, and there's caves in that gorge, and that's where they mature the cheese.
okay. Well, and it was in a cave,
Yeah.
ironically, where they found Cheddar Man, and so they found the remains of somebody from 9,000 years ago, and they were able to extract DNA, and they find somebody still living in Cheddar who is a genetic direct ancestor of Cheddar Man. And I'm thinking, man,
No way!
you have a family who's been living in the same fucking town for 9,000 years.
Yeah, but it's not like
Move.
mitochondrial
Please
or Y
move.
DNA. It's just like
No.
a connection because
It
it's
doesn't mean they didn't marry anybody who moved in.
yeah, exactly. It's just one line. It's like mother, father, mother. It could be any. I don't think it's a direct father or a direct mother lineage. It's like a mixture.
I'm sorry that I'm interjecting.
Yeah, and he
we
was
have to-
dark skinned, as far as we
Yeah.
know.
No, you're right. We have to get back to
Yeah,
Tomer's
we
commentary.
didn't finish with chapter 9, and I still have some commentary. Yeah, I know. So verse 18.
I like how you dance around your catchphrase.
Yeah, exactly.
Not gonna say your catchphrase. Which,
Nope,
by the way,
but
Peter has made
acknowledges
arrangements
it. Yeah.
so that we can have T-shirts. You will have a T-shirt. I will have a T-shirt. And if you don't say the catchphrase, I will point to it once I get your T-shirt.
Yeah.
We love
Of
your
course.
catchphrase, Tomer. Don't hold it back from us. That's
It's
cool.
for very specific times.
Okay, fine.
I won't say
don't,
when.
Don't abuse it. I get it. Thank you.
Okay, I'll continue. So on verse 18, I fell prostrate before the Lord. So the Septuagint, Peshitta, and Targums Pseudo Jonathan read, I prayed before the Lord. And Tigay comments, it is not clear precisely when in the course of the events he prayed. It is unlikely, despite the location of verse 18, that he did so between the time he broke the tablets in verse 17 and the time he destroyed the idol in verse 21. He would hardly have waited 40 days to destroy it. According to Exodus 32 to 34, he pleaded with God 3 times before coming down the mountain with the first set of tablets, after punishing the sinners, and when he took the new tablets up to God. Since the wording here in Deuteronomy is very close to that of Exodus and presupposes information found there, commentators like Abravanel, Luzzatto, and Weinfeld have assumed that Moses' 3 references to prayer here correspond to the 3 instances in Exodus. On the other hand, the references here in Deuteronomy can be understood as 3 partial reports of 1 prayer, and it is possible that Deuteronomy has condensed the 3 into a single instance. In either case, Deuteronomy is not interested in a chronological report, but in presenting information about Moses' prayer at the points where it is most effective in illustrating Moses' theme. And finally, on verse 21, according to Exodus 32:20, Moses sprinkled the ashes into some water and forced the Israelites to drink it. Nachmanides writes that he did not mention it by way of humiliating them for their deeds, because he did not want to tell them that he had done to what he had done to them. Because he did not want to tell them that he had done to them what is done to wives suspected of adultery, as seen in Numbers 5 verses 16 to 22. Weinfeld writes that the account of Exodus should be understood as an ordeal, and the author of Deuteronomy, who does not admit sacred media into his judicial system, intentionally omitted the detail about the ordeal.
How
And
did
that's
I
it
not
for
notice that? That drinking the ground up ashes of the remnants of the idol was similar to the forced abortion in Numbers 5 to give to the potentially unfaithful wife.
Yeah, and I think that wasn't it the potion or whatever made
Mhm.
later on using like dust from inside the temple.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
like
it
that.
was. And it would
I mean,
make
you've
you
also got
ill.
like, yeah, there's also like sprinkling potions as well. Like, so you've got like for the leper
Mainida.
and also the spiritual cleansing. Well, I guess it's the same one for those two.
But this one, the woman has to drink it, and it has the dust
Mm.
of the temple, and also in this one, it has the dust of the idol, and the people are forced to drink it in the Exodus story.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Okay.
Okay, you should finish this chapter, Will.
Okay. All right. So is the chapter? We're still on 9.
Yes.
Fuck me.
Your fault.
Why
We're
are you
almost
guys
done.
holding up everything?
Yeah, and why?
All right. Chapter 9, verse 22. You also made the Lord angry at Tebera, at Massa, at Kibroth Hatava. And when the Lord sent you out from Kadesh Barnea, he said, "Go up and take possession of the land I have given you." But you rebelled against the command of the Lord your God. You did not trust him or obey him. You have been rebellious against the Lord ever since I have known you.
Bitch.
Just not that into you, dude. Move on. I lay prostrate before the Lord these 40 days and 40 nights because the Lord had said he would destroy you. And I prayed to the Lord and said, "O sovereign Lord, do not destroy your people, your own inheritance that you have redeemed by your great power and brought out of Egypt with a mighty hand. Remember your servants, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Overlook the stubbornness of these people, their wickedness and their sin. Otherwise, the country from which you brought us will say, because the Lord was not able to take them into the land he promised them, because he hated them, he brought them out and put them to death in the desert. But they are your people, your inheritance that you brought out by your great power and outstretched arm."
Okay.
Wow.
So I'll start my commentary. Verses 22 to 24. Nelson comments, verse 22 returns to the geographic catalog begun with at Horeb in verse 8 and further illustrates the accusation of verse 7b and verse 24. Again, the text counts on the reader's familiarity with tradition. These locations are known from Numbers 11 verses 1 to 3 and 31 to 34 and Exodus 17 1 through 7. Their ominous names recall the cautionary tales connected with them: Tav'era, burning; Masa, testing; Kivrot HaTa'ava, graves of craving. Significantly, these three traditions also involve successful intercessions. The Kadesh story in verse 23 alludes to the tradition of Numbers 13 to 14, but also connects to Deuteronomy 1 verses 19b to 32 through verbal links to 121, 26b, and 32.
Who are you quoting there?
Nelson.
Okay, because he's ignoring the fact that only two of those places are mentioned before, because Tabora is not mentioned anywhere.
I think it
No, I
As
haven't
I-
is
come across it
mentioned.
before.
As far as I'm aware, I mean, so Ibn Ezra actually mentions it, and
Numbers
he's like,
11. It looks like Numbers 11, 1 through 3.
is it mentioned?
It is mentioned. Yes, yes.
Oh, okay. But it's only mentioned together with Masa, no?
Wait a minute. He says here, the scripture does not mention it in the Torah portion. Ele masei, I think.
Oh, it's not mentioned as one of the stations.
The stations. Yes, yes.
Oh,
Yes,
this,
no.
yeah, Tabera was where he just randomly burned a bunch of them in the middle of the story. Just the fire from the Lord came down and toasted a bunch of people because God was angry, and he gets really pissy when he's angry.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. So the story's mentioned there together with Messiah in Numbers, but it's not mentioned in the list of stations in Numbers 33.
Reminds me of the Stations of the Cross. Look at the torture porn. Look at the other torture porn. Meditate on how much of a piece of shit you are. Look at the other torture porn.
Torture porn.
On verse 24, ever since I have known you, while this rendition is supported by the Peshitta, Targums, and Saadia Gaon, Tigay comments, it is not clear what this refers to, since Israel's rebellious acts did not begin when Moses first came to them, but only in the wilderness. Bechol Shor thinks that the phrase refers to the Hebrew man who challenged Moses' right to intervene in a fight, as seen in Exodus 2, verses 13 to 14, but that was a challenge to Moses, not God. The JPS translation, as long as I have known you, implies that the phrase is simply a hyperbole. The Septuagint and Semantic text read, since the day he, i.e. God, knew you, corresponding to Hosea 13:4, quote, I knew you in the desert, end quote. In both passages, knew can mean either chose, looked after, or met. In any case, that reading means that Israel has been rebellious since the beginning of its relationship with God. On verses...
Maybe God's a shitty husband.
On verses 25 to 29, Lundbom writes that these verses are more fitting to be placed after verse 14, filling out what in verses 13 to 14 is a truncated report of the first intercession. He writes that these verses are supplement to the narrative of verses 13 to 14. This is also found in ancient legal writings, where a scribe, instead of inserting material in the text which would fit naturally and chronologically, will instead put it in the end. Nelson writes that verse 25 backtracks to the intercessory prayer as a resumptive repetition of verse 18.
Okay, so overview detail. Got it.
On verse 27, Weinfeld comments, the wickedness of the people may in fact justify their destruction. Therefore, Moses invokes the merits of their ancestors, who serve as protectors of their descendants. Interceding with the ancestors on behalf of their children was a common phenomenon in ancient Israel and in the ancient Near East. Intercession was called in Akkadian, quote, to keep fatherhood, end quote. The Kruman Manual of Discipline reads in 2:9, quote, may there be no place for you at the mouth of any intercessors, end quote. And in rabbinic literature, the term for intercession is, quote, to invoke the merit of the fathers, in Hebrew, zchut avot, end quote.
In the comments, in the live chat, Unlucky Legume, I wish I could tag it here, I can't.
I was just about to read that.
Oh,
so, yeah,
you go ahead.
I'm glad you. No, I'm glad you seized upon it. Please read it.
Okay, Unlucky Legume says, gotta love how Moses' whole argument about why God shouldn't destroy his people has nothing to do with compassion or mercy. It's just basically just people will call you a failure and make fun of you.
Right? So,
yeah.
so it's like a public relations thing. It's not like if there was a God that actually existed and really possessed power. This is somebody whose power exists only by electoral. So,
well,
I mean,
but the argument, even if he has all power, is just you're going to look bad if you destroy them. Like, honestly,
yeah, so you've got to worry about
a narcissist to do anything. You're just like, dude, that's going to make you look really bad. So maybe we do this thing that makes you look good.
You may not get reelected.
Yeah. Not that it matters. You can just have a tantrum.
And that was Moses, right? For someone who at first was like very hesitant, I don't know if I'm a good spokesperson or whatever. He's actually appealing to God's ego on this one.
Which again, that's
and God's ego, let's be realistic, would not exist if he really was the uber shit that if he existed and was the uber shit that he's painted to be. He wouldn't have this ego.
God's ego is the biggest part of him.
Yeah. All right. So
my final comment. Yeah. Yeah. My final comment on verse 28. Tigay comments. Here, Moses invokes the most daring argument against annihilating Israel. It would give a damaging impression of God. God is not indifferent to what humans think of him. Moses knew that one of God's motives in his actions against Egypt was to show his incomparable power to the world, as seen in Exodus 9, verses 40 to 16, 10, 1 to 2, and 14, verses 4 and 18, which is essential if the nations are to recognize him voluntarily. Moses turns God's aim to Israel's advantage in arguing for pardon. If God should destroy Israel, he would appear powerless or diabolical and damage the stature that he had gained from the Exodus. Moses made the same appeal after the disastrous report of the scouts, and Joshua later made a similar one after Israel's defeat at Ai, as seen in Numbers 14, verses 15 to 16, and Joshua 7, 9, end quote. Tigay also notes that some ancient Near Eastern texts give a similar argument that Moses gives. For example, a Hittite prayer appeals to the gods to, quote, bring not thy name into disrepute, end quote. The appeal to God to act for the sake of his name is found in prayers like Psalms 23:3, 25:11, and 79 verses 9 to 10, and in prophetic literature, Isaiah 48 verses 9 to 11, Jeremiah 14 verses 7 and 21, Ezekiel 29 and 22:44. And that's it for my commentary.
Good catch, Lilith, and well timed on pointing that out.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, all right. So we're done with 9.
Yes.
Okay. Moving on. Do we have time?
Yes, we do.
We do. Okay. So this one is listed. I'm now looking at the new revised standard version, the anglicized. So the NSRVA. And this is under the heading of the second pair of tablets. Just like the first set of tablets, which are nothing like the first set of tablets.
You can quote that long acronym to Christians who complain about LGBT keep adding more letters. Like, what the fuck is the NSRV?
I don't want to side with those people at all, but I do get where I can't even, where I stumble over it. So I have started using the term queer folk. I hope that people don't find that objectionable.
Jimmy Snow from the Mormon show.
Oh yeah, I've heard of him.
Yeah, you've heard of him once or twice, I'm sure. But incidentally, I got a Book of Mormon this week. I'm so excited to read along. But hey, I got a fabulous used bookstore. But anyway, not the point. He was at one point advocating gender sexual minority.
GSM.
Yeah. The term GSM, which would have
gender
been
and sexual minority community thing.
Which would actually
GSM community
cover like all of that. But I don't know if it ever really caught on, which is too bad because again, it's just I often too just use queer because it's sort of a catch-all.
Yeah, I mean, I can get, and I don't want to deviate at all on this, but I mean, I can get where a gender identity might be more significant, but if we're talking about where gay or straight or bi, I don't see there being a point in even thinking about that, because to me most people are, I used to think that most people were gay or straight or something like that, but I've now more recently seen that people are like on a spectrum. So that there's very few people who are like myself, relatively few people who are just like all the way straight or all the way gay. That most people are somewhere, and depends on the person, depends on the circumstances. You might consider experimenting with it. So why the fuck do we even make an issue of this? Why does it matter? So on gender identity, okay, I get that it matters there, but whether you're gay or straight or bi, who gives a fuck? Maybe it's Friday, maybe you're feeling pretty, maybe this one person is special to you. Who cares? Everybody has the right to whatever. And so, yeah. But enough of that. So, moving on to Deuteronomy 10. At that time, the Lord said to me, carve out 2 tablets of stone like the former ones, and come up to me on the mountain, and make an ark of wood. I will write on the tablets the words that were on the former tablets, which you smashed. and you shall put him into the ark. So I made an ark of acacia wood, cut 2 tablets of stone like the former ones, and went up the mountain with the 2 tablets in my hand. Then he wrote on the tablets the same words as before, the 10 commandments that the Lord had spoken to you on the mountain out of the fire. Fire on the mountain, lightning in the air. Sounds volcanic. So, then he wrote on the tablets the same words before, the 10 commandments that the Lord had spoken to you on the mountain out of the fire on the day of the assembly, and the Lord gave them to me. So I turned and came down from the mountain and put the tablets in the ark that I had made. And there they are, as the Lord commanded me. There they are, as if we can see them. The same words as before, even though there's only 2 that are comparable, and they're paraphrased. And the other 8 are entirely different. But they're the same as
you're
before.
reading from the English translation, so it's not really like that. It reads
No, I think
which means and they yeah, I mean JPS reads where they still are. So
Okay.
yeah, which is again like, is it talking
Vihushan.
about, when is that talking about? Is it talking about when he's saying the speech? He's saying, oh, the tablets are still in the wooden ark, or is the writers saying now when we write this? I would say, yeah, that I think the idea is like the written down 10 commandments are different, but the idea is only one of those 3 is on both sets of the actual tablets.
Well, it's the first 2, that are comparable between Exodus 20 and Exodus 34. It's just the first 2 that are comparable at all, and both of those are paraphrased.
Yeah.
And all of the others
The
are
ones about
entirely
how
different.
and the ones about how I'm super important and you shouldn't pay attention to anyone else because if you do, you're a dirty whore and I'm so special.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will completely cut you off if you look at another girl's ass. I get all that. Yeah. So then, verse 6. The Israelites journeyed from Beroth Benajakin to Moserah. There Aaron died, and there he was buried. His son Eleazar succeeded him as priest, and from there they journeyed to Gudgodah. I remember Gudgodah. He fought Godzilla in 1967. Gudgodah. From Gudgodah to Jotbatha, a land with flowing streams. At that time, the Lord set apart the tribe of Levi to carry the ark of the covenant of the Lord, to stand before the Lord, to minister to him, and to bless his name to this day. Therefore, Levi has no allotment, or inheritance with his kindred. The Lord is his inheritance, as the Lord your God promised him. How far did you want me to read, Tomer?
Yeah, finish the chapter.
Okay. I stayed on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights, as I had done the first time. And once again, the Lord listened to me. The Lord was unwilling to destroy you. The Lord said to me, get up, go on your journey at the head of the people, that they may go in and occupy the land that I swore to their ancestors to give them. So now, O Israel, what does the Lord your God require of you? Only to fear your Lord, the Lord your God, to walk in all his ways, to love him, to serve the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul, and to keep the commandments of the Lord your God and his decrees that I am commanding you today for your own well-being. Although heaven and the heaven of the heavens belong to the Lord your God, the earth with all that is in it, yet the Lord set in his heart, in love on your ancestors alone, and chose you, their descendants after them, out of the peoples, as it is today. Circumcise then the foreskin of your heart. That sounds invasive. And do not stubborn any longer. Stubborn is a verb. For the Lord your God is God of gods and Lord of lords, and King of kings and bigger than big. Sorry. The great God, mighty and awesome, who is not partial and takes no bribe, who executes justice for the orphan and the widow, and who loves the strangers right into slavery, providing them with food and clothing. You shall also love the stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. You shall fear the Lord your God, him alone, and you shall worship to him, and shall hold fast by his name. You shall swear. He is your praise. He is your God, who has done for you these great and awesome things that your own eyes have seen. Your ancestors went down to Egypt 70 persons, and now the Lord your God has made you as numerous as the stars in heaven. So there's only 2 million stars in heaven?
Approximately.
Yeah.
I'm so impressed.
I mean, it could be referring to like visible to the naked eye,
Yeah.
which is only a
I
few
lived in
thousand.
Los Angeles, so we could see dozens of stars.
Yeah, dozens.
Well, before light pollution. So.
Mm.
Okay, on verse 1, a wooden ark, and Nelson comments, Deuteronomy depends on the more complex story of Exodus 34 verses 1 to 4, but has added the ark to its source text. Deuteronomy views the ark as a chest for deposits rather than as a war palladium, 1 Samuel 11:11, throne, Numbers 10 verses 35 to 36, or footstool, Psalms 132:7. The ark is demythologized into a container, a record box for national archives, as seen in Deuteronomy 31:9, 25 to 26, and 1 Kings 8:9. Yahweh commands only wood, quote unquote, but Moses follows the tradition of acacia wood, reflected in Exodus 25:10, which is priestly, and many of the tabernacle furnishings. Perhaps acacia connotes wood that is hard and durable.
Possible.
You
On
can also
verse-
get DMT from it. Dimethyltryptamine.
Really?
Yep.
Interesting
Yeah,
thought.
I mean, how accurate is the identification of shittim with acacia?
I think I looked into it maybe a little bit. There's certainly the acacia of that region of the world looks a little different than it would look up here. But I think in terms of like the species and everything and some of the properties, I think it all checks out. But don't quote me on it. Look it up for yourself.
I'm not an arborist either, so.
On verse 3, Tigay comments, in Exodus, the ark is built later by Bezalel, along with the rest of the tabernacle. Some commentators, like Rabbi Yehuda ben Lakish in Talmud Yerushalmi and Shekalim 6:1 and Rashi, infer that there were two arks, and that the one built by Moses was used to house the tablets temporarily until Bezalel built the permanent one. Others, like Ibn Ezra, Nachmanides, and Abravanel, hold that there was only the ark built by Bezalel, and that Moses making, quote unquote, the ark means that he had it made after he came down from the mountain. Critical theory assumes that the passage reflects a different tradition about the building of the ark from that related in Exodus.
See, a different tradition would make sense, but to me, it kind of seems like they had a tradition which in Exodus was kind of made, I don't know, made loftier, right? Because this one, I could see them stemming from the same thing. I've talked about this before. I think that the original Ark of the Covenant was a statue of Yahweh, but the idea
That would
of,
imply that there was one.
yes,
You
Probably
think
not.
there was an Ark of the Covenant?
I think it was a statue of Yahweh. Yeah.
I've heard
but
all kinds of strange
the
things.
ark
and there was
literally
one
means like a
person that thought
box.
it was like a fire box that they'd bring into
Right,
battle.
but so once there are I recommend reading Thomas Romer's book on this, or he makes an argument for it in his book Invention of God, and it's really solid. So the like the object that they would carry around with them in their processions would have been a statue.
Hmm.
So whether or not you want to call it an ark, up to you. I don't care. But the idea that that's
later.
referring to like an actual object is yeah, I think that there probably was. But I think it was a statue, and then in these texts, you know, because of the and I hold on, and iconography of the time, they're, you know, they have tried to make that as least they've tried to like write that out essentially, but there are still plenty of hints. You know, putting it in the temple of the Philistines right next to the other statues, and the idea of it being, you know, a processional thing. We have seen that in so many cultures where they would, in ancient Near Eastern cultures, where they would take an actual statue on their processions. So I think it's likely that there was an Ark of the Covenant that was a statue. And
I think
that-
there is a in Tutankhamun's grave, for example, there is like a Anubis statue that is on top of a box with staves, and it looks kind of like an Ark of the Covenant. But I think the box is supposed to represent a temple building. So I guess maybe it's possible that the statue would be on top of this box for carrying in processions, and maybe that's where the traditions.
it would be his
kind of
footstool.
brought in.
Shocker.
Having
Didn't we
a
get-
litter style thing to carry around is very. They still do that with the Catholic processions, and the, you know, you got the Mary and the Jesus and the.
Yeah, it's more of a flat.
Okay,
yeah.
so help me understand this, because I understand that ark means box, basically a
Mhm.
crate, right? So not a boat, it's a box. So
Well-
and in this case, the box is on I forget what they call it, the two poles that the people would carry like this. And,
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
and it,
Yeah.
and it,
Got
it used to
rings.
carry people like that, and I forget when it's carrying people, there's a different name.
Oh, that's
But-
a
A litter.
a pool. Yeah, I know what you're talking
Yeah, I
about.
can't remember what it's called, but you've got the two poles that people would put on their shoulders and hold with their hands, and so you got a guy in the front and a guy in the back, and there's a seat, and then the box has a seat, a mercy seat, whatever the fuck that means, and then it's got to describe the angels that are supposed to be crafted on the top. So this is the sculpture part that. You know, Lawrence is saying that this is a sculpture, that it was supposed to be angels on opposing sides facing each other with their wings closed toward each other.
So in my head, I kind of think that the angel wings are instead like okay, so you have this seat, right? And
Mhm.
then like, you know, one side of the seat, you know, the whatever they're called, the fucking armrests, right? Like they would be the wings of the angel, and then the back of the seat would be the other wing of the angel. And they're kind of surrounding it that way.
So was this meant to be a seat? Was this meant to carry a person?
Well, no, it's a statue, so it was the person sculpted in there. So and this is argued for in Romer's book, if anyone's wondering, the full argument for it. But you'd have a statue of Yahweh, and then so he's sitting on the throne, but then his feet are on this footstool, and that was just referred to as the ark.
Yeah, and that's because like offerings were brought to the gods or the deities' feet. And so
Yeah,
for some reason Yahweh is that much more special, where he gets his own footstool.
Yeah, like you will have no other gods before me. In my head, that means literally other statues of gods in front of mine. Like,
So does
What I-
that mean that, like, basically this was a seat with the wings of the angels and the idol of Yahweh was on there, and then as part of this evolution they took the statue off, or who knows, maybe it was stolen or something, and tried to say that, oh no, God is magically here and his presence is so special we can't represent it in a statue, and just kept the box basically?
so it kind of depends. So like after the Babylonian exile, the ark completely disappears from the narrative.
Yeah.
And the thing is already
Until
kind of
Ron Wyatt discovered it.
Right, of course.
Hey, it was
so-
Indiana Jones.
Because in the Exodus narrative, we get that the ark is inlaid with gold, right? It has a bunch of gold on it. And at the end of the King's narrative, it tells you that the Babylonians destroyed everything that was made of gold. So I think that it intrinsically tells you that the ark doesn't exist anymore; it was destroyed, which is why it disappears from the narrative. But that's my explanation of it. I think it fits, honestly.
Fair enough.
So oh man, I always fuck up this word. The iconographic thoughts of the time had to kind of move away from the idea that they had this statue of Yahweh. So they were just tying in their identity with the law instead, and the things that are in the ark rather than the thing itself.
And then maybe perhaps demystifying the whole belief that perhaps God's presence is contained therein. And I think Deuteronomy just makes it out to be sort of like a shipping pallet, but not much more than that.
Yeah, in Deuteronomy, it's really
Deuteronomy.
nothing like
Yeah.
nothing
Yeah, I think-
special.
Yeah, so I think it's Rashi who says that this wooden one is different from the one that was made later, and he says that it's possible that that when they went to war, they would use the wooden one, and it was only when they used the temple one in what was it with when the Philistines like took it from them.
With Samuel's
like a
sons
pun-
when they were killed.
Oh,
Or Samuel, Eleazar's son, Samuel, the priest that raised Samuel. His
maybe.
sons were killed in battle, and they took the ark out, and they were killed, and the ark was taken by the Philistines. I think. It's
yeah,
in
the
verse.
days. Oh, here we go. In the days
also-
of Eli, it says. I don't know when that is.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
that,
Samuel.
that's
First
him.
Samuel.
Yeah.
It's also important to note that the Ethiopian church believes that they have the ark, but they won't show it to anyone.
Ah, the totally real ark that nobody
Yep.
can see, like the totally real golden plates.
I
Or-
heard they've got like guards with machine guns and everything outside guarding the.
Damn. Something like that.
Lawrence, wait
Who was
until
the
Arn
from
reads
Game
the
of Thrones?
comment. You're in for a treat.
The one who, but what was it? The character in Game of Thrones, who took in Daenerys Targaryen, who had built and paid for the most intricate and immovable door ever created to guard his vaults, which turned out to be full of nothing.
I don't remember that episode.
Zaxxon, something like that. Like X.
Zara Hemla. I'm sorry.
I
no.
can probably look it up for you.
The big black guy, the city of the slaves, and that she overtakes. And
Oh,
then he
yeah,
has
Zara's
an affair
on
with her
Daxos.
serving woman, and yeah, I'm bad with names. but
Yeah,
I'm good with
yeah. Zaro Zoan Daxos.
Okay, I don't blame myself for not remembering how to pronounce that.
You don't
Yeah,
want to
it's like
hear
X.
how I would pronounce that. Okay, so what about it?
Or just he did the same thing with the guarding. Oh, it's big dramatic. I'll pay their weight in gold to anyone who can get through this door. All this big deal about how this is a totally impenetrable force, and it's guarding nothing.
Yeah.
So
He didn't have
yeah, I remember
money.
when they discovered a secret safe from, I think it was Al Capone, and they had this big live action thing for all this news and everything, because they're going to break into this safe and they're going to see what Al Capone had, and it's empty, but it's a live show, and they spent 30 minutes hyping the fuck out of it. Nothing. Okay, so moving on to the comments then, since that fell flat. All right. Eric Wander says, this chapter says that Moses made the Ark of the Covenant. But in Exodus 37, it says that Bezalel made it. Was Bezalel a nickname for Moses or a completely different dude?
I've addressed this
Yeah,
already.
covered that,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, but Zalo is the
Bezalel.
other dude.
Yes.
But somebody's asking the question, right? So
I've
obviously
already
they didn't-
answered it.
he asked it before
Yes.
we got to that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. The argument being that Moses had it made by a skilled craftsman, which he was not necessarily, because he was a shepherd before he was a prophet, leader, magician thing.
Okay. And then Eric Wander says, also in Numbers, we read that Aaron died on Mount Hor. Mount Hor? Yeah, it is Mount Hor.
Mount Hor.
But in this chapter, it says that he died at Mosera. Well, maybe he did it twice.
I have a comment on
So,
this.
Yeah.
is
Wouldn't be the
Mosera
first
the
time.
same as Mount Hor? Or maybe Mount Hor is located in Mosera?
I have a comment on this, so be
Yeah.
patient.
This is something I've been
So
waiting
we
for.
haven't gotten to your commentary yet?
No,
Okay. So are you going to, but we'll just wait.
read the
We-
comments first. Don't be patient.
This is so weird. I kind of actually enjoy the way Tomer disrespects me this way. Okay, so Q Continuum says, howdy. Have any of you heard of the hypothesis that the Ark was stored in Area 51? I'd never heard that.
That's the dumbest thing I've ever fucking heard.
Yeah, you would think, right?
It's
I
actually a
wish
VTOL.
if I didn't live in Texas, because Lawrence doesn't live in Texas. You see him wandering around the labyrinth in which he lives. He has a look at the size of the room that Lawrence lives in. His room, his one room that you can see here, is bigger than my whole house. It doesn't. The camera doesn't even show where he keeps the Minotaur.
It sometimes visits.
Yeah, I got to visit him once upon a time. I'm like, dude, I could land a plane in here.
Yeah. Speaking of that, it's I think according to the theory that it's in Area 51, it's a VTOL aircraft, the Ark of the Covenant. No, you stand on top of it and it flies.
Oh,
So everything I just saw Lawrence put on his headphones. So everything I just said about and to him, he didn't even hear. So nobody
Shit.
tell him.
What did you say? I was dealing with the cats. They were causing havoc.
I said your room is so fucking huge. The room that we can see from your camera, the part of it we can see from your camera, just that part is the size of my whole house.
No shit.
I mean, I think my room is bigger. My room is big enough to have a diplomat.
Get up and walk to the. Get up, because I've been to your room too. It just you weren't in it. And get up and walk to the other side where the Darwin statue is, like Lawrence just did, because he's not using a green screen. He really lives in this huge fucking labyrinth.
No,
when I got to see,
this is the
when I got to see the room that he broadcast from, I'm like, dude, I could land a plane in here.
Right? Yeah. That the studio is a lot.
Do you realize how many snakes I could store in that room?
That's how you think now. That's your dimension perspective.
Yeah, Americans
someone-
will use anything but the metric system.
Okay, we need. I'm gonna tell someone in the chat specifically to she knows who I'm talking about. You need to make a meme of Aaron tapping Lawrence's head or whatever, and say, "Can you imagine how many snakes I can fit in here?" Or, the meme of the car.
The car salesman.
I don't like the notion of me tapping Lawrence's head. I don't want anything that appears remotely disrespectful at all.
Wow, I'm offended.
Well, I mean like the box with with the screen where he is.
Okay, you can do that with Tomer tapping my head. I have a comment about this. Okay, so and I wish, getting back to my original point on the thing about the people with the thought of Area 51 and Lawrence, who thankfully lives a long way from Texas, doesn't think that there are people that stupid. Have you been to Texas? I can introduce you to people who live on my fucking street. who will stun you at how stupid people can be. You know, the Large Hadron Collider in Switzerland, it was supposed to be built here. It was supposed to have been built within an hour's drive from where I live. But the town that was going to receive it, that was going to receive all this bounty from having this kind of a thing built there, Waxahachie, Texas, which is just south of Dallas-Fort Worth, they turned it down because the city council there thought that it was going to open a gateway to hell. The city council turned down the money to build a Large Hadron Collider here because they thought it was evil.
You know, the thing is, no matter where they build it, in their mind,
I'm not done.
Open a gateway to hell. So
they didn't want
only
the mayor
smart
didn't.
people. Only smart people would figure that out, right?
But the mayor didn't want them open.
But let me give you an idea how stupid Texas is. They were going to build over in the Permian Valley, and people in the Permian Valley or Permian Basin don't realize what the fuck Permian Basin means. They don't know what the Permian stratigraphic column is. They have no idea that it is based on the fossils. They live there. The whole town is funded by fossil fuels, and they don't understand what the fuck fossils are.
That's just 6,000-year-old flood deposit. We all know that.
Think about this. You're not ready for what I'm about to tell you, man. Brace yourself.
Yes, I am.
So there's this one small town off the freeway that doesn't have like the interstate running through it, where they were going to build this huge array of solar panels that was going to feed the rest of the state, because in Texas has its own independent grid. You have like the western grid and the eastern grid and the Texas grid, which failed pathetically a couple of years back, famously, and nobody got punished for that. We're just going to gloss that over. They lied. They took a bunch of money, but because we have nothing but corruption here, then nobody got any punishment. But anyway, so there was this one town where it was suggested they were going to set up this massive array, because all they've got is rattlesnakes out there. So they were going to set up all these solar panels. It was going to be enough to use the intensity of the desert sun to store energy for the rest of the state. First problem was that Texans don't understand that you can store energy. They don't know that batteries exist. They think that solar power only runs while the sun is available, that you can see it, right? They don't realize that you can still keep heating your house even at night based on what you charged up from during the day. They're that fucking stupid. But to let you know how much more stupid they are than you thought that anybody could be, nobody could be this stupid. There was this whole town, and it was in the news. It wouldn't, obviously not in Milwaukee or Israel or wherever, but they were going to set up this massive array of solar panels, and the city council of that town turned it down because if you're drawing power from the sun, they thought it would drain the sun.
I honestly think I heard that one.
Yeah, I heard that one too.
Yeah. I was gonna say about the Hadron Collider, like the governor of Texas probably didn't want a gateway to hell because then people would escape from Texas.
That's good.
Oh no!
Yeah, no need to go to Canada no more.
I love that people would escape Texas to go to hell.
Was it bombs away?
Oh.
Or maybe they
All
feared a great wave of migrants coming out of it, taking people's jobs or something.
Oh yeah.
And then Eric
Right.
Wander
Wow.
offers a gifted 5 RN Raw memberships. Tomer, please continue.
Thank you. Verses 6 to 7. Several commentators wrote that this is an itinerary or an antiquarian note, much like verse 6 to 7, which I don't know why I repeated it. Although Weinfeld and McCarthy extend the note to verse 9, Lundbom rejects this. McCarthy writes that this note was placed here because it contained information about Aaron and Eleazar, the first Levites consecrated to priesthood. She notes that the itinerary differs from Numbers 33 verses 31 to 38 in several points, which we'll get to some. The Samaritan text has rewritten verse 6 to 7 in order to harmonize it with Numbers 33 verses 31 to 38. So first on verse 6, from the wells of Bnei Ya'akan to Moserah, according to Numbers 33:31, the Israelites went from Moseroth to Bnei Ya'akan, while Ibn Ezra rejected that Bnei Ya'akan is related to the wells of Bnei Ya'akan. According to Talmud Yerushalmi Yoma 1:1, followed by Gersonides, they are the same. Nachmanides writes that Mount Hor was a very large mountain, and so Bnei Ya'akan and the wells of Bnei Ya'akan are in different areas of the mountain.
Yeah, this one I thought was very interesting. So we've got this over here. It says Be'eroth Bnei Yakan first, and then they went from there to Moserah, and then from there to good God, and then Yotbath. And if we go to Exodus, it's the opposite way round. They kind of go from Yotbath to Hora Gidgad, and then they go to Moserat, then Bnei Yakan. So so you have got like three different opinions, right? One opinion is like these are the same places, and what happened was that after Aaron died, the people grew scared of invading, and they backtracked, and that's why it says here they went from Be'eroth Bnei Yakan to Moserah, because they've gone backwards, and then of course Ibn Ezra brings up his opinion that it's not. These are just new places. They're not. Be'eroth Bnei Yakan is a different name, and it's related to a different place. And Moserah is just another name for Har HaHor, where Aaron did die. And then there is one more, which I think you meant. Tom had just mentioned about the mountain being very large, and so
Yeah, Nachmanides.
somehow he was able to. Yeah, Nachmanides. But Nachmanides also says that Ibn Ezra's opinion is. What does he call it? Does he say it's hot air or something like that?
Let me see.
Love how they're bitching at each other.
Yeah.
Oh.
Unless I read it not enough. Maybe it was a different one I was reading. Yeah, so like they're like, oh, the mountain's really big, and so they've gone along the mountain along the plains through these place names, and then they've somehow gone up the mountain but backtracked. So he did die in Moserah because that part of the mountain is opposite. It's very stupid, and it's like, yeah, don't even think that it's possible that the place names don't match and are in the wrong order because this was written by people at different times.
What's the explanation of the whole Mount Horeb, Mount Sinai thing? Like,
yeah, it's
are
just
they the same?
multiple names for the same place.
Yeah.
But it's very possible. We don't know. It's very possible
Wait,
that
they're
Horeb
still
and
in.
Sinai.
They're
two
still in the
different-
same place. This is where they get the Ten Commandments. The same mountain.
No. Sinai is also called Horeb. Mount Horeb.
Right. Yeah.
And Horeb is also Hor.
No.
No. That's
It's
something
possible
else.
that Moserah might be Mount Horeb, because it says in verse 6 that Aaron died in Moserah and was buried there, which
Yeah, I have a
contradicts where
comment
it
on
says
this.
that he died in Har HaHor. Oh, you probably
Yeah.
we'll get to that.
Yeah.
That's the next bit. So that's part of the whole like there's like these three different explanations of what's going on here. Right, keep going.
On Aaron died there. According to Numbers 33 verses 37 to 38, Aaron died in Mount Hor. Rashi comments that the Israelites went to Egypt after the death of Aaron because they feared Arad, and the Levites fought against the retreating Israelites until they reached Moserah, where the Israelites mourned Aaron as if he died there. See also Targums Pseudo Jonathan. Sforno writes that it refers to part of the people who went to herd sheep in Moserah, and they were informed of Aaron's death there. Lundbom notes Felix Marie Abel's opinion that Mount Hor could be part of the Moseroth mountain range, just as Mount Nebo was a part of the Abarim range, seen in 3249.
Yeah, the idea of the mountain being this long, because I think he says it's something like 5 parsecs, which is like 25 miles. No, maybe not that long. Something like 20 miles. And each of the
I would have
place
thought that 5 parsecs was longer than 20 miles because
no,
the
not
Millennium
a
Falcon.
parsec. A parasang. It's an ancient Persian distance.
Parasite
equivalent to
is an ancient Persian.
Yeah, parasite, right? I don't know how to.
one parasang is about 3 or 3.5 miles.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So it's not that big a deal to do the Kessel Run in 3 parsecs, is what you're saying.
I love being around a collection of nerds like yourself.
Oh.
Okay, on verse 7, Gud Goda. Rashi, followed by Lundbom, identified it as Cho Hagid Gad from Numbers 33, verses 32 to 33. Ibn Ezra, however, rejects this and writes that it's a general term for Salmona, Punon, and Oboth, found in Numbers 33, verses 41 to 43. On verse 8, from there, more accurate will be at that time, Ba'et Hahi. Rashi, Rashbam, and Bechor, followed by Lundbom and Tigay, wrote that it refers to the encampment at Horeb when the calf was made and the covenant was renewed. Nachmanides, however, wrote that it was after Aaron's death. On verse 10, as I did the first time, in Hebrew, Kayamim Harishonim, literally at the first days. Septuagint omits this clause, and McCarthy writes, Wevers understands Septuagint's minus here as, quote, omitting the recognition that this is Moses' second lone stay on the mountain, end quote. Lofink, however, noting that this is a difficult case, argues in favor of the Masoretic text being a secondary clarifying expansion, seeking to establish a link with 918, not as a direct harmonization, but through echoing the twofold use of Karishonim as the first in 10 verses 1 and 3.
Yeah, because I think it's possible people might get they were worried people might get confused and think that this is a third time he's going up the mountain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. On
It's
verse
almost
12,
like sorry, no, I was just gonna make a joke. I was just gonna say it's almost like these locations have as many names as Aragon or any other Lord of the Rings characters. It's like Jesus.
Okay, but
Ugh.
that has a logical explanation that people speak different languages, so people speaking this language will call him by this name. It doesn't really make sense in the Bible where it's like, yeah, Sinai is also called Horeb, but for some reason in this book it's called Horeb, and in this book it's called Sinai.
Well, to me,
like
that kind of
doesn't
speaks of
it's all written by the same person.
Well, yeah, if we go with like the whole tradition.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense.
They are more logically consistent than God. Is
Yes.
my point.
Yeah. Historically speaking, yeah, you'd probably have influence of the place names of like the place name of a place from another culture that called it something else.
Yeah, we do have examples where it's like this thing, which is also called this thing, like Syria, Mount Syria and Mount Hermon, like that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Like you want to mention a name, a local name that people know it by.
Okay, on verse 12, Lundbom comments, this is a tidy summary of Deuteronomic theology, which calls for total commitment to Yahweh. These internal and external inclinations are augmented by a command to keep the commandments in verse 13. The call echoes the Shema and liturgy in 6 verses 4 to 9, the latter repeated in 11 verses 18 to 20. Fearing Yahweh is an interior disposition consisting of awe and reverence, showing itself in worship. Walking in Yahweh's way has strong ethical implications in the Old Testament. Loving Yahweh in Deuteronomy is the proper response to Yahweh's love for Israel. Another major theme in Deuteronomy is the call for Israel to serve Yahweh, which again includes the worship of Yahweh and only Yahweh. The warning more often in Deuteronomy is not to serve other gods or idols, which is an express violation of the second commandment in 5:9. The liberation in the Old Testament and also in the New Testament is a change of masters. In Egypt, Israel did hard service for Pharaoh. Now Israel is to serve Yahweh joyfully and with ease.
Yes, because you're my slaves now, because I'm so awesome and I freed you to be my slaves. So you'll be my slaves, but you'll really like it. And if you don't like it, I'll kill you. So be sure to be very convincing when you tell me you like it.
On verse 14, the heavens, even the highest heavens. In Hebrew, it's Hashamayim v'shmei Hashamayim, which literally reads the heavens and the heavens of the heavens. Weinfeld notes that the Mesopotamians viewed that there are 3 superimposed heavens. In Jewish literature, we find 7 firmaments, and in the New Testament, we hear of multiple heavens. For example, third heaven in 2 Corinthians 12:2, and far above the heavens in Ephesians 4:10.
Yeah,
Okay, so I'm a little confused about that. So when you die here, you go to heaven. And then if you're defeated by that level's boss, you then go to the
so these layers of heaven, it's their cosmology, right? Or yeah. So they have all these layers of heaven. Some of them contain the stars, some of them contain the moon and the sun. Some of them contain, what they believe. They'd be like, oh, there are angels here. This one is God's domain, something like that. And yeah, in Mesopotamia, they did have 3. They had 3 layers of heaven and 3 layers of earth. There are Tomer noted the 7 layers of heaven, for example. There are some apocryphal texts that have 10, and God is usually at the highest one. That's his domain.
Yeah, that's actually the concept I was talking about earlier.
Yeah, I was gonna ask if like the 7 is Hellenistic, like because of or I don't know, is it Plato or whatever, where he puts each planet and the sun and the moon?
Yeah, well, the sun and the moon that were thought to revolve around Earth
so it goes
would
like,
then delineate because we could tell that Jupiter was farther away. So it was, the moon was the lowest and thus the most earthly and dirty of the heavens. And then you go up, Mercury, Venus, the sun, which in the Dante is where I wanted to go because they had all the, the libraries and all the smart people. And then, up the planets of the ones they knew, obviously, until you get to the outer heavens with the stars. And then it just all, is about God and how special he is. He's so very special.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that like the New Testament's use of it is necessarily based on any kind of Platonism, because they already had this idea in Jewish thought as well.
No, that was an adaptation of it to increase knowledge of.
I wonder if maybe it's just a coincidence, like the Jewish tradition was like 7 is a magical number, some days of the week, some planets, whatever, but they didn't think about, maybe it was a later idea by Plato too, or was it Aristotle, to say that the planets have their own sphere.
Yeah.
They actually have their own sphere, rather than it just being like the sun and moon in like the lower heaven, and then the stars in a higher heaven, and then the others are all spiritual.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that does make sense. So you could see the concept adapting over time to different, slightly more informed, but still, not totally informed views of, what was learned about the stars.
Now on verse 16, circumcise your hearts. The Hebrew Bible reads, circumcise the foreskin of your hearts. The Targum reads, remove your foolishness. Ibn Ezra and the Commentaries read, cleanse your heart until you understand the truth. Sa'adia Gaon, remove the thoughts of sin. And Gersonides, remove the barriers of your heart so you can hear the Lord's commandments. And Weinfeld comments, the election of the fathers, and especially the election of Abraham, which was sealed by the covenantal sign of circumcision in Genesis 17, triggered the idea of circumcision here. The Deuteronomic author, however, interpreted circumcision in a figurative manner, not circumcision of the flesh, but circumcision of the heart, in other words, of spirit and soul. The same idea formulated in the same manner is found in Jeremiah 4:4, where the people are asked to, quote, be circumcised to Yahweh and to remove the foreskin of their hearts, end quote. Verse 16 is also reflected in the Manual of Discipline, aka Community Rule of the Kurman sect. Quote, to circumcise in the community the foreskin of the mind and the stiff neck, in 5:5. Compare also Pesach Habakkuk 11:13, quote, its interpretation is the priest who did not circumcise the foreskin of his heart, end quote. On verse 17, God of gods and Lord of lords, Lundbom writes that while these expressions probably had their origins in polytheistic religion, their meaning in Deuteronomy is not chief among the gods. It simply aims at expressing the absolute sovereignty and supremacy of Yahweh. This title appears in other texts like Psalms 136 verses 2-3 and Daniel 2:47, and in New Testament texts like 1 Timothy 6:15 and Revelation 17:14. Lundbom further notes that titles like King of Kings and Lord of Lords were used by kings in the ancient Near East to express their greatness. Alternatively, Targums read God over judges and Lord over kings. And Ibn Ezra thought that gods, in Hebrew Elohim, and lords Adonim are angels. And so this verse means that God is above the angels. And Sfono writes that the lords are the celestial bodies.
Yeah, those are definitely ways to interpret that, right? Like the fact that kings have been using these kinds of titles. So if you want to demonstrate that you're over kings and judges and or even angels, yeah, you'd definitely use that. However, we've covered this before. There's plenty of polytheism in the Bible. We're going to cover it in Deuteronomy 32.
I mean, it's interesting they doesn't use the language of like you know, Yavat like a lord of the what's the word?
Armies?
Fa'ot. No, there's another
Army?
word that hosts, lord of hosts.
Yeah.
Lord of
They don't
hosts,
use
yeah.
that expression because that kind of implies like, you know, god of angels rather than god of other gods. But yeah.
Well, the hosts could also be armies.
Yeah.
I mean, that
Yeah.
phrase is used a lot, but I mean, you could be armies of
Maybe it's
angels.
like
Remember how all
yeah.
the times that we totes won a battle, it was angels and shit, and yeah, totally legit.
Although it's also
I got so
bodies.
confused when I hear about all these things that angels can do. I watched the movie with Michael with Mr. Saturday Night Fever, and I watched Dogma and a handful of other movies that represent these angels according to the Old Testament and how awesome and powerful they are. Single angel can lay waste to whole cities and all that. And yet, when I read the Quran, you could have 1,000 angels join you in battle and not have any effect at all on the outcome. It's
If God
like
has
they're entirely
designated otherwise.
imaginary.
Maybe there were 10,000 demons on the other side that the angels defeated for you, and if they were not there, the demons would have defeated you. I don't
Yeah, so
Calvin
it just
Ball.
ends up on the balance
know. Yeah.
looking like two armies killing each other to death.
Yeah.
Calvin Ball. It's all theology is Calvin Ball.
Calvin's what?
Calvin Ball from Calvin and Hobbes. It's
Oh.
a game where you make up the rules constantly as you go, and you have to find reasons why your new rule fits with the old rule, but that's the only rule.
Okay, on verse 18, the fatherless and the widow, Tigay comments, they are frequently mentioned as examples of the impoverished and the powerless, subject to exploitation, and the Torah makes special provisions for their protection. That God is their protector is mentioned in Exodus 22:21 forward and elsewhere. This is another aspect of God's loyalty, for protecting the fatherless, the widow, and the poor was a proverbial responsibility of ancient kings, end quote. The Septuagint and several Dead Sea Scrolls have the fatherless preceded by the stranger, in Hebrew Yale. McCarthy notes that the trio stranger, fatherless, widow appears 11 times in Deuteronomy and a further 7 times elsewhere. McCarthy writes that Septuagint probably assimilates to 27:19. And on verse 20, Nelson comments, verse 20 picks up fear and serve from the list of verse 12 and 13, then repeats or cites the command of 6:13, adding the idea of davak, cling, from the realm of human love, as seen in Genesis 2:24, 34:3, and 1 Kings 11:2, and loyal attachment to a leader in 2 Samuel 22. To swear in a god's name would be to acknowledge the power and overlordship of that god, as seen in Jeremiah 5:7. This admonition would have limited Israel's capacity to participate in international treaties. And finally, in verse 21, he is the one you praise. In Hebrew, it's hu tehilatecha. The word tehillah usually means praise or song of praise, according to BDB Dictionary, Nachmanides, and Saadia Gaon. Alternatively, it can be read as you are praised above all people, as Nachmanides renders it. He is your glory, Ibn Ezra, Chizkuni, Tigay, and Weinfeld, or he is your boast, Septuagint. And that's it from a commentary.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for that, Tomer. I wish I could comment further, but we are already over time. So if anybody else is welcome to. If you have comments, go ahead, present.
I think we managed to throw most of it in there. So
okay, very good.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
very well done.
Yeah, in the next stream, I think we're going to enter into the code itself, the Deuteronomy code on chapter 12.
The law.
Okay.
Oh yeah, that's gonna be so much fun.
All right. Well, I really like this team, and I like what we're doing here. This is the best way to read the Bible. So we're all good for Tuesday. Well, Mark, I understand you might show up late, but otherwise we all good. And you don't have to show up. You're just here by invitation, and we appreciate you being here when you can. But
No, you
we're all
have
good
to.
for.
Yes, you do. You do.
Yeah.
We will come for you.
I'll try the best I can.
Isaac knows
Basically-
where you live.
It's mandatory for me, at least. So,
Wait, I know who lives.
Mark, just
Mark, you
play
know Mark
along.
is-
You're supposed to be.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
yeah. Aaron and I are neighbors.
Yeah.
There you
Yeah.
go.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So looking forward to seeing as many of you as possible on Tuesday. I guess we'll say goodnight.
Saturday.
All right.
Oh, wait.
Tuesday.
Yeah.
Yes.
Today's Saturday, my guy. See you on Tuesday.
Today
everyone.
is Saturday, so we're going for we are shooting for Tuesday. You don't confuse.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought it was Tuesday.
Squirrel. Squirrel.
All right.
Yeah.
Bye bye, everybody.
Discord, yeah.